Now talk to Dr. Richard Wellings from the Institute of Economic Affairs. Joins me live in London. Well, right after taking power in Greece and Italy, the technocrats, the financial experts as it were, their first stop was Brussels. And does that mean that all Eurozone decisions are being made there now?
Well, I think so, and obviously there's also Germany's political elite is now hugely powerful because they actually hold the purse strings. But there is a huge worry. I mean, are these reforms going to be successful if they can't carry the people with them? If we don't really have much of a democracy left in Europe.
What about those reforms carrying the governments involved, the Eurozone governments? Does it not ring the alarm bells for them that they're going to lose their sovereignty, lose their autonomy, especially if we see fiscal control over their economies? Are we going to see them rebelling and undermining the euro even more?
I think there is a fair chance there will be some sort of rebellion, hopefully a political one, not anything worse. But of course we could see rebellion among the German people because they're the real losers from fiscal integration. So German taxpayers and German savers who, if we do get fiscal integration, will actually be bankrolling Southern Europe in perpetuity. So they're the really big losers.
Interesting, talking about Germany, the Chancellor Angela Merkel, she said that investor confidence can't be restored purely financially. She's saying that Europe needs a coherent political answer. Well, surely some would say it's the politicians at fault here. They're the ones who've caused the insecurity with their indecision and lack of ability to handle the situation, and that's why we're seeing the technocrats coming in to try and sort out the mess.
Well, the irony is, of course, that many of these technocrats were the architects of the disastrous Euro project in the first place. So really, it's pretty annoying that they're now in charge of all of these countries. But the real problem, of course, is that the system itself is fundamentally flawed because it doesn't work having a one-size-fits-all monetary policy over this huge geographical area. And we don't have the safety valves like we have in the United States, like labour mobility and allowing whole regions to decline decade after decade. So really the system is flawed and the only long-term solution is actually an orderly breakup.
Flawed? There seems to be some sunshine on the way. We've just heard that the Greek Prime Minister, he's been promised his country will receive the next bailout tranche before the end of the year. That's a good sign, isn't it? Does that mean that Athens can breathe a sigh of relief now?
Well, in the short term, yes, but all they're doing is playing past the parcel with the debt, so there's no actual long-term solution to the crisis.
What about bond buying? The European Central Bank, it's been criticised for not buying up more government bonds. Can't it just print more money and just limitlessly buy up any debt it needs to? Well,
of course, the problem is in those sort of situations, it's savers in the whole Eurozone that are then being ripped off by the money printing process. If we look at history as well, eventually when bank lending goes up to normal levels, you will see a huge spike in inflation. And given current government debt levels, it's not clear how the ECB could actually reverse that process to choke off the inflation. So I think in the long term, it's a very dangerous strategy to start printing money.
Trying to look at these affected Eurozone countries, it's a job to find anything positive at the moment, isn't it? News is coming from France. It still retains its AAA credit score, but the markets certainly aren't treating it in a positive way. Its borrowing costs are far too high at the moment, well, rising certainly, and that's alarming, isn't it?
It is, and if you look at the prices of credit default swaps, it suggests that the true credit rating of France is something like BBB or that sort of ballpark. So obviously the markets, there's a huge divorce between the markets and the credit rating agencies at the moment, which is very worrying for France.
But what about Spain? Is that a slightly different picture? We know that Greece, Portugal and Italy, they're all accused of either being heavily in debt or just spending too much in the past. But Spain is a slightly different situation because actually its economy hasn't been that bad up until now, has it? So is this a very worrying and different scenario development for Spain?
Well, I think Spain's probably more like Ireland in the sense it had this enormous property boom a few years ago, and so there were huge economic dislocations, and because there's been so much government intervention and these haven't been allowed to adjust, I think there is a real danger with Spain, and I've been predicting problems with Spain for a long time just because its economy had this enormous unsustainable boom.
Richard, your final prediction, just briefly, for the Eurozone itself?
Personally, I think probably the ECB will be leaned upon to monetise the debt, and eventually this will prove to be disastrous, but it will buy them time for the next few years.
Dr. Richard Wellings, always good to hear your thoughts. Thank you very much indeed. Joining us live there from the Institute of Economic Affairs in London.